Hello, guys. We are into the second day of Kerala Set Power Session. We did 20th century, we did 19th century British literature yesterday, and today we will do 20th century British literature and also, if possible, American literature. We will be doing a power session, so I will be going very fast so that we can cover a lot in a short period of time. Would you like that, guys? I think it'll be good. Okay, so we start with the early 20th century. Dear friends, in the early 20th century, there is a man who was born in 1857, and his first book is Almayer's Folly. Almayer's Folly is the first novel by Joseph Conrad. In which novel by Joseph Conrad is a man called James Waite. He is a West Indian black sailor on a ship, and he is dying of tuberculosis. It is the novel, The Nigger of the Narcissus. The Narcissus is a ship, in which a periodical was Heart of Darkness, serially published. Heart of Darkness was serially published in Blackwood's magazine. And what is the name of the boat in Heart of Darkness, where Charles Marlowe is sitting and telling his story? It is Nellie. Nellie is the name of the boat. What are the last words of Mr. Coutts? Of course, it is horror, horror. After that, Marlowe does not hear anything more. And what does the messenger boy say, which T.S. Eliot wanted to be the epigraph of Hollow Men? The messenger boy reports Coutts's death as Mr. Coutts, he dead. Who wrote an essay called An Image of Africa, criticizing Joseph Conrad's depiction of race? An Image of Africa is a critique of Heart of Darkness by Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe. In which novel of Joseph Conrad is a captain of a ship deserting the ship at the crucial moment? It is in Lord Jim, and the ship's name is very interesting. It is Patna. Patna. In which novel of Joseph Conrad is the protagonist stealing a hoard of silver? It is Nostromo. Nostromo. Very good, guys. Now, let me go on to another writer of this time, the author of Jungle Book, which is the novel by Rudyard Kipling about an Irish orphan living in Lahore. It is Kim. Kim is Kimball O'Hara. Now, in which year did Rudyard Kipling get Nobel Prize in Literature? It is in the year 1907. He was the first English language writer to get Nobel Prize in Literature. Now tell me, guys, who is the author of The Time Machine? Of course, it is H.G. Wells, which is H.G. Wells's new woman novel. It is Anne Veronica. Anne Veronica. Tell me the name of the man who wrote the plays The Silver Box, Strife, Justice. It is John Galsworthy. John Galsworthy's novel series is Fawcett Saga. Who criticized Galsworthy and Bennett as materialists? It is Virginia Woolf in Modern Fiction. This was the previous year question in Kerala Set. What is the name of the trilogy written by Arnold Bennett? It is Clayhanger Trilogy, and it is set in the famous 5 towns or potteries. I hope you're enjoying this video. If you like the video, please press the subscribe button and the bell button. Also share with your friends. Thank you very much, guys. Now, moving to another writer. Who is the author of Howard's End? Of course, it is E.M. Forster. Do you know who wrote the screenplay of the movie Howard's End? It is Ruth Pravar Jabwala. What is the epigraph of Howard's End? Only connect. Right. What is the name of the city in which A Passage to India is set? A Passage to India is set in the city of Chandrapur. And who's the protagonist? Dr. Aziz Adila questioned Mrs. Moore. Very good. Which is the novel by E.M. Foster. The two novels set partly in Italy, Where Angels Fear to Tread and A Room with a View. They are partly set in Italy. What is the name of the series of lectures, published lectures of E.M. Foster, where he talks about 7 aspects of the novel, including flat and round characters? It is Aspects of the Novel, the non-fiction work, Aspects of the Novel, whose pen name is Saki. Saki is the pen name of H.H. Munro, who created the detective Father Brown. Father Brown is a detective created by G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton, who edited the volumes of poetry called Georgian poetry. Georgian poetry anthologies. 5 anthologies were there, edited by Edward Marsh. Edward Marsh. Very good, guys. The Georgian poets include W.H. Davies, John Masefield, John Drinkwater, and Rupert Brooke. Which among these writers, who among these writers wrote The Soldier? It is Rupert Brooke. Who wrote the Emma poems? Emma poems, the Dinas, these are poems of Thomas Hardy. Very good, guys. Who wrote about the pity and horror of war? The pity and horror of war. It is Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen. Do you know the author of poems like Tortoises, Birds, Beasts, and Flowers, the poem The Snake, Mosquito, Bavarian Gentians? These are poems by D.H. Lawrence. Which is the first novel by D.H. Lawrence? The White Peacock. But before we go into D.H. Lawrence, which play by George Bernard Shaw is about democracy? A king is contesting in an election. That is the play Apple Cart. Apple Cart. Blunt Chili is the chocolate cream soldier. In which play? It is in Arms and the Man. Arms and the Man. Eugene Marchbanks and James Morrill are 2 men who are taught a lesson by a woman. In which play? It is Candida, a Mystery. Candida, a Mystery. In which play does Bernard Shaw use the Don Juan theme? Don Juan theme. It is in Man and Superman. It also deals with life force. What is the name of the heroine in Man and Superman? It is Anne Whitefield. Anne Whitefield. Okay. Roebuck Ramsden, Colenso Ridgeon. Roebuck Ramsden is wrong. Colenso Ridgeon, Sir Ralph Bloomfield Bonington. These are doctors. Once more, I will repeat. Colenso Ridgeon is a doctor. Sir Ralph Bloomfield Bonington is another doctor. In which play? Everybody knows that. It is the Doctor's Dilemma. Doctor's Dilemma. Very good. Now, guys, who is the scientist of phonetics in Pygmalion? It is Professor Henry Higgins. And what is Colonel Pickering? Colonel Pickering is a linguist of Indian dialects. Linguist of Indian dialects. Very good, guys. Which is the play by Bernard Shaw where Saint John is a character? It is Saint John. The Joan of Arc is a character in the play Saint John. Please remember that. Which is the play by J.M. Synge, which led to riots in Dublin? This is a PYQ in Kerala set, which is the play by J.M. Synge, which led to riots in Dublin. It is Playboy of the Western World. Playboy of the Western World. In which group of islands is Riders to the Sea set? Riders to the Sea is set in Aran Islands. Aran Islands. Christy Mahon is a character in Playboy of the Western World. Christy Mahon. Very good, guys. Lytton Strachey, Clive Bell, E.M. Foster. They were part of which group? They were part of Bloomsbury Group. Who wrote the 13-volume novel series called Pilgrimage? 13-novel series called Pilgrimage, where stream of consciousness was introduced. It is Dorothy Richardson. Who coined the term stream of consciousness in the context of psychology? It is William James, the brother of Henry James. Very good. I hope you're enjoying this video, guys. In which year was Virginia Woolf and James Joyce both born? It is 1882. 1882. Who is the husband of Virginia Woolf? He was working in Ceylon civil service. It is Leonard Woolf. Leonard Woolf. What is the name of the press that Virginia and Leonard Woolf started? It is Hogarth Press. Very good. Who is the economist in Bloomsbury Group? It is John Maynard Keynes. John Maynard Keynes. Remember that, guys. Virginia and her sister were part of a club called Memorial Club. Please remember that also, which is the first novel by Virginia Woolf. It is The Voyage Out. It is also called Melimbrosia. Remember that also. You know that 1922 is the year of publication of The Wasteland and also Ulysses by James Joyce. Which novel by Virginia Woolf was also published in 1922? It is Jacob's Room. Which novel by Virginia Woolf is set in one day during a party? It is Mrs. Dalloway, 1925 novel. In Mrs. Dalloway, there is Clarissa Dalloway, the protagonist. Who is the foil character to Clarissa? It is Septimus Warren Smith. Septimus Warren Smith is a war veteran. Which novel by Virginia Woolf is set in an island in the Hebrides? Hebrides is an archipelago in Scotland. It is To the Lighthouse. This is also a very important novel written in Stream of Consciousness. What is the name of the couple in To the Lighthouse? It is the Ramsays, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay. What is the name of the artist in To the Lighthouse who could not finish a painting? It is Lily Briscoe. The artist is Lily Briscoe. Very good, guys. In which novel by Virginia Woolf is a man changing into a woman? A man is changing sex and becoming a woman overnight when he sleeps. That is Orlando. Orlando, a biography. Which novel by Virginia Woolf is about a cocker spaniel? It is Flush. Flush, which is the last novel by Virginia Woolf. It is Between the Acts. What is Common Reader? What is Common Reader by Virginia Woolf? Common Reader is an essay collection by Virginia Woolf. In which year was A Room of One's Own published? A Room of One's Own was published in 1929. Which are the two colleges where she delivered a lecture, which is the basis for A Room of One's Own? She delivered a lecture in two colleges on women and fiction. Which are the two colleges? It is Newnham College and Girton College. Girton, G-I-R-T-O-N, Newnham, N-E-W-N-H-A-M. What is the sequel to A Room of One's Own? A Room of One's Own has a sequel and it is called Three Guineas. Are you loving this, guys? I am loving it. Tell me, which is the short story collection by James Joyce? Collection of 15 short stories. It is Dubliners, 1914. Dubliners. Very good, guys. What was the original title of A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man? A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was published in 1916, and it is originally titled Stephen Hero, Stephen Dedalus. That is the name of the protagonist. Very good. I am loving this. You are loving this too. What is the sudden revelation that happens in Virginia Woolf's novels and James Joyce's novels? It is originally biblical. It is an epiphany. Epiphany. Very good. Now, in Ulysses, who are the three central characters? Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, and Penelope Bloom. Molly Bloom. Molly Bloom represents Penelope. Stephen Dedalus represents Telemachus. And Leopold Bloom represents Odysseus or Ulysses. What is the day in Dublin on which Ulysses is set? Ulysses is set on 16th June 1904. Will you remember? 16th June 1904. Isn't 1904 the year of publication of Shakespearean Tragedy by A.C. Bradley? Please look it up. I think it is. How many parts are there? 3 parts are there, okay, in Ulysses. The Telemachus, the Odyssey, the Nostos. Telemachus means the story of Telemachus. Odyssey means Odysseus' journey. Nostos means the return. Which is the novel by James Joyce, which has elements of dream allegory. Dream allegory. It is Finnegan's Wake. Arey guys, wake up, don't sleep. I am trying to do some revision here. Please join me, guys. Okay, if I am boring you, I am very sorry. I am so sorry. But Kerala Set, if even one person watches this video and passes, it will be good. So I want to do it. This is the second day of Kerala Set Power Course. Tomorrow is the third day. Okay, D.H. Lawrence, coming to D.H. Lawrence, you already know that The White Peacock is his first novel. Which novel by D.H. Lawrence was published in 1913? It is Sons and Lovers, originally titled Paul Morrell. Remember that? D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers is dedicated to whom? It is dedicated to its editor, Edward Garnett. Edward Garnett, remember that. Which 2 novels of D.H. Lawrence are companion novels meant to be published together? They are The Rainbow and Women in Love. The Rainbow and Women in Love. In Rainbow, there are 3 couples. In Women in Love, there are 2 women. Who are they? Ursula and Gudrun. Ursula and Gudrun are the 2 women in Women in Love. All right, guys. Which novel by D.H. Lawrence is set in Australia? It is Kangaroo. Easy to remember. Which novel by D.H. Lawrence is set in Mexico? It is The Plumed Serpent. The Plumed Serpent is set in Mexico. Did you know D.H. Lawrence wrote a lot of stories, short stories? He wrote a lot of plays. He wrote some criticism. D.H. Lawrence wrote Why the Novel Matters. Remember that? Why the Novel Matters. D.H. Lawrence is associated with 2 terms, blood consciousness and star equilibrium. Blood consciousness means we are connected to our blood, to our origins. And star equilibrium means a man and woman or 2 individuals can be attracted and repelled like 2 stars. Remember that, guys. Who wrote the epic poem Cantos? It is Ezra Pound who wrote the epic poem Cantos. There is a character that he created, Hugh Selwyn Moberly. This is a poet who is getting disillusioned with Europe. Will you remember that? Ezra Pound was an assistant to W.B. Yeats. And Ezra Pound introduced haiku, tanka, Japanese no theater, etc. to W.B. Yeats. Ezra Pound was American. He founded Imagism along with Amy Lovell, Hilda Doolittle in University of Pennsylvania. And Ezra Pound from America went and migrated to England. From there, he went to Paris. From Paris, he went to Italy. In Italy, he died later. During the Second World War, he supported Mussolini's fascism and he was punished by the American army. He was put in an open cage. Oh my God. Like Imagism, he started another movement called Vorticism. In which year did T.S. Eliot win Nobel Prize? In Kerala said last year they had asked about chronologically arranged Nobel laureates. Please remember that. T.S. Eliot won Nobel Prize in 1948. Remember that. T.S. Eliot converted from Unitarianism to Anglicanism. Remember, that was the same year in which he got British citizenship, which is his first famous poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock first appeared in the magazine called Poetry, which is the poem by T.S. Eliot about an old man talking to a young boy. It is Gerontian. Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock has an epigraph from Dante's Inferno. From there, he took the epigraph of Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Dear reader, I will tell you my secrets because I know you will not go out and tell the world about it. That is the meaning of the epigraph. Very good, guys. Where is the epigraph of The Wasteland taken from? From Satyricon by Petronius. How is the dedication to the wasteland given? The dedication to the wasteland is Il Miglior Fabbro, or the better craftsman. And that means Ezra Pound. How many parts are there in the wasteland? Obviously 5 parts. What are they? The burial of the dead, a game of chess, fire sermon, death by water, what the thunder said. At the end of the wasteland, which Upanishad is evoked? Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Right, dear friends. And next question to you is, what is the blessing at the end of the wasteland? Shanti is the blessing at the end of the wasteland. According to T.S. Eliot, who is the protagonist of the wasteland? It is Tiresias. And the wasteland has a mythical method and a cinematographic technique. Okay, guys. When Eliot converted to Anglicanism, he wrote a poem. It is called the conversion poem. That is Ash Wednesday, which is the essay by T.S. Eliot, where he says, poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. It is in tradition and the individual talent. He's talking about his impersonality theory. He's saying a poet should be like a capitalist. Poetry is organization, not inspiration. Are you loving this, guys? Very good. Which is the essay by T.S. Eliot where he talks about objective correlative? It is Hamlet and his problems. Which is the essay where he talks about unification of sensibility? It is the English metaphysical poets. Very good, guys. There is a group of 4 poems by Eliot. The title is taken from music. It is 4 quartets. Okay. Eliot also wrote The Hollow Men, The Journey of the Magi. Remember, which is the play by T.S. Eliot about St. Thomas Becket's murder in the Cathedral, published in 1935. Okay. He also wrote other poetic plays, The Family Reunion, The Cocktail Party, The Confidential Clerk. the elder statesman. All right. Who is the early 20th century writer who worked as a BBC reporter? He wrote about blindness and vision, and he wrote Jesting Pilot about his travelogue to India, his travel to India. It is Aldous Huxley, which is the famous dystopian novel of Aldous Huxley, where Savage John is the protagonist. It is Brave New World, the first novel by Aldous Huxley. Tell me, guys. It is Chrome Yellow. Chrome Yellow. Who are the 1930s poets? It is W.H. Auden, Stephen Spender, Cecil Day Lewis, Louis MacNeice, Christopher Isherwood. Remember that. Very good. Okay. Let me ask you a few questions. The Fall of Rome, The Shield of Achilles, Homage to Clio, The Unknown Citizen. The Unknown Citizen, poem by W.H. Auden. He also wrote Musée des Beaux-Arts. Musée des Beaux-Arts. Will you remember that? Who wrote An Elementary School Classroom in a Slum? The Pylons, Trial of a Judge. These are the famous works of Stephen Spender. Tell me this now of Human Bondage, The Moon and Sixpence, Cakes and Ale, The Razor's Edge. Some of these novels have connections with India. Once more, Of Human Bondage, The Moon and Sixpence, Cakes and Ale, The Razor's Edge. These are the famous novels of Somerset Maugham. Very good. Somerset Maugham. That is great, guys. Who wrote the Catholic novels? The Catholic novels are Brighton Rock, The Power and the Glory, The Heart of the Matter, The End of the Affair. It is Graham Greene. Graham Greene created the character Whiskey Priest in which novel? It is in The Power and the Glory. Will you remember which is the first novel by William Golding? That is famous. It is Lord of the Flies. Who is the famous 1940s poet associated with New Apocalypse? 1940s poet is Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas wrote The Fernhill, Poem in October, Do Not Go Gentle into the Good Night, Under Milkwood, etc. Which is the famous group of poets of the 1950s? It is the movement poets. The movement poets who edited the anthology Poets of the 50s. This editor was a poet himself, D.J. Enright. Listen, everybody, D.J. Enright wrote Poets of the 50s. Dear friends, only these 3 days in the power course, I will speak so fast. Otherwise, like a good girl, I will teach you very, very slowly. Okay, don't worry. Right, guys. Next question to you. Who is the author of Next, Please? 1914, Ambulances, Church Going. You know, it is Philip Larkin. Philip Larkin wrote 2 novels, Jill and A Girl in Winter. Ellavarkum manasilavunundo, orma varunundo. I just talked in Malayalam because I wanted to know if Kerala said people are here. Dear friends, tell me who is the author of the poetry collections The Hawk in the Rain, Lupercal. It is Ted Hughes. Ted Hughes. Full Moon and Little Frida, he wrote. Will you remember? Full Moon and Little Frida, which are the poems of Ted Hughes that show violence. Which poems of Ted Hughes show violence? Hawk roosting, pike, thrushes, jaguar. Remember these, will you? Ted Hughes wrote a series of poems called Crow Poems. Crow Poems, will you remember? And in which poem did he talk about Sylvia Plath and his relationship with her? Birthday Poems by Ted Hughes. Tell me, guys, In which year did Seamus Heaney get Nobel Prize? Seamus Heaney got Nobel Prize in 1995. He's an Irish poet. He wrote about the peat bog. Peat bog is the place where people can fall and die. Oh, it is such a mushy ground. You want to know the famous bog poems? Bogland, Bog Queen, Digging, Punishment. Remember, guys, in which poem did Seamus Heaney talk about playing with frog spawn? Playing with frog spawn, he talked about in Death of a Naturalist. Death of a Naturalist. Will you remember, everybody? Who is the present poet laureate? It is Simon Armitage. Before that, who was the first LGBTQ poet laureate? It was Carol Ann Duffy. Carol Ann Duffy. Okay. Noel Coward and Terence Rattigan are associated with which kind of drama? Noel Coward, Terence Rattigan, associated with drawing room comedies. Okay, which is the famous play that inaugurated, Angry Young Man movement. It was performed on 8th May 1956. 8th May 1956. Which play was performed? It was Look Back in Anger by John Osborne. Very good. Which play by John Osborne is depicted against the Suez Canal crisis? Which play by John Osborne is depicted against the Suez Canal crisis? It is The Entertainer. Which play by John Osborne is the sequel to Look Back in Anger? It is Deja Vu. Sequel to Look Back in Anger is Deja Vu. Very good. I am proud of you. Okay, which play by John Osborne is about Martin Luther? Martin Luther. It is Luther. The play Luther. Very good. John Osborne is associated with Angry Young Man movement. There is another movement associated with John Osborne and Angry Young Man. It is kitchen sink drama, kitchen sink realism. Kitchen sink realism originated from painting. When one John Bratby painted kitchen sinks. Okay, there is David Sylvester who wrote a critical essay about kitchen sink realism. Arnold Wesker, Sheila Delaney, they are associated with kitchen sink realism. Will you remember, guys? Very, very good. Now, tell me who originated the concept of absurd. It is Albert Camus in The Myth of Sisyphus. Myth of Sisyphus. Who wrote the novels Murphy, Molloy, Malone Dies, Unnameable, Murphy, Malone Dies, Molloy, Unnameable. These are novels by Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett. What is the subtitle of Waiting for Godot in English? In English only, Waiting for Godot. Originally, it was written in French, remember? In English only, it is titled A Tragicomedy in 2 Acts. A Tragicomedy in 2 Acts. Okay. Oh, it was first directed by Roger Blinn. This question came in Kerala set before. Roger Blinn. Who is the director of the first performance? Which actors took the role? Those who are preparing for net and set also, please study that. It is important and I don't know very clearly. Okay, guys? Ta-da-dang. In which play by Samuel Beckett do you find a man carrying a suitcase full of sand? He's also carrying a picnic basket. It is Waiting for Godot. Lucky is carrying it. Okay. In which play do you find Ham, who is blind and cannot, he sits in his wheelchair, not blind. He's not blind. He's invalid. He sits in his wheelchair. Then there is Clove, who cannot sit down. Ham, Clove, Nag, Nell. In which play? It is Endgame by Samuel Beckett. Endgame. Like Waiting for Godot is an important play. Ta-da-dang. whose first full-length play is The Birthday Party. The Birthday Party is the first full-length play of Harold Pinter. Before that, he wrote The Room. The Room, that is also important. Okay, in which, what is the name of the protagonist in The Birthday Party? Stanley Weber. Stanley Weber is being interrogated by two men. Who are they? Goldberg and McCann. Goldberg and McCann. Okay, what is the kind of comedy that Harold Pinter is associated with? Comedy of menace. Comedy of menace. The Blind Waiter, The Caretaker, these are all the Homecoming, other plays of Pinter. Will you remember, guys? Comedy of menace. Okay, who is the author of the play The Pope's Wedding? Saved. Black Mass. Bingo. It is Edward Bond. Edward Bond's first play is The Pope's Wedding. He wrote a play about Shakespeare called Bingo, Bingo, which is the play that Edward Bond wrote about King Lear. Edward Bond wrote Lear, Lear, about King Lear. Okay, Edward Bond used a lot of violence on stage. Violence. He also wrote The Bundle, okay, that is prescribed in universities. Okay, who is the author of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, based on Hamlet? It is Tom Stoppard. Tom Stoppard. In which play of Tom Stoppard is Byron referred to? Byron is a character living at that time in Arcadia. Arcadia. Okay, guys, in which play of Tom Stoppard do you have the character James Joyce, Tristan Zara, Vladimir Lenin? These are characters in Travesties by Tom Stoppard. Travesties by Tom Stoppard. There is a play written by Tom Stoppard set against Mahatma Gandhi's Dandi March. Did you know? Tom Stoppard wrote Indian Ink based on Dandi March. Okay, guys, there is a play called Top Girls. It has only female in the cast. Only female cast, Top Girls. It is by Carol Churchill. Carol Churchill. Carol Churchill was influenced by Theatre of Cruelty. Theatre of Cruelty. Who is the French playwright associated with Theatre of Cruelty? French playwright Antonin Artaud is associated with Theatre of Cruelty. Will you remember? Did you know that Carol Churchill employed dance drama? Dance drama. And Carol Churchill also wrote verse plays. R.A. Serious Money is a verse play by Carol Churchill. Will you remember that? It is important. Okay, guys. Next question to you is, who is the author who took the pen name George Orwell? George Orwell is the pen name of Eric Arthur Blair. Eric Arthur Blair. Very good. Which is the travelogue that he wrote about his life in London and Paris? George Orwell. Down and Out in Paris and London. George Orwell worked in Burma and he had to shoot an elephant there. About that, he wrote an essay, Shooting an Elephant. He wrote another novel about it, about Burma. What is it? Burmese Days. Burmese Days. Very good. Which is the novel of George Orwell published in 1945? It is Animal Farm. Which is the novel of George Orwell published in 1949? It is 1984. 1984 has the protagonist Winston Smith. Animal Farm has the protagonist Napoleon, a pig. Napoleon, Snowball. Napoleon represents whom? Stalin. Snowball represents whom? Trotsky. Trotsky. Okay. In 1984, what is the name of the country in which it is set? It is Oceania. Who is ruling Oceania? Big Brother. who is running the party. All right. Very good. Now, who wrote, I will ask you another question. Who wrote Politics and the English Language? It is an essay by George Orwell. George Orwell also wrote Inside the Whale, Leo Tolstoy and the Fool. Will you remember? Leo Tolstoy and the Fool. Why I Write. These are all by George Orwell. Okay, guys, which is the novel by William Golding, published by 21 publishers? It is Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies. Very good. What does Ralph represent in Lord of the Flies? Ralph represents democracy in Lord of the Flies. Ralph, Piggy, Jack, remember that. Lord of the Flies represents to the head of a pig, and also Beelzebub. Beelzebub. Very good. Now, who is the author of the Malayan trilogy? It is Anthony Burgess. Wrote Malayan trilogy, A Clockwork Orange. Which novel by Anthony Burgess is about Shakespeare? Shakespeare, which novel by Anthony Burgess? It is Nothing Like the Sun. Which novel of Anthony Burgess is about Marlowe? A Dead Man in Deptford. Nothing Like the Sun is about Shakespeare. A Dead Man in Deptford is about Marlowe. Will you remember that? Which novel of Anthony Burgess is about John Keats? Abba Abba is about John Keats. Which campus novel made Kingsley Amis famous? Kingsley Amis wrote which campus novel? Lucky Jim. For which novel did Kingsley Amis get Booker Prize? The Old Devils. Kingsley Amis is an angry young man. Will you remember other angry young men are John Wayne, John Brain, Alan Sillitoe. Alan Sillitoe wrote a story about Colin Smith. Which is that story? Alan Sillitoe wrote a story about Colin Smith. Which is that story? It is The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. The prime of Miss Jean Brodie is set in a school in Scotland. Who is the author? The prime of Miss Jean Brodie is by Muriel Spark. Very good, guys. Going well. I hope you're loving this. Next, Under the Net, The Bell. These are novels by an Irish author, Iris Murdoch. Don't worry. The Golden Notebook, Children of Violence series by Doris Lessing. Doris Lessing is a very important writer and Nobel laureate. Tell me, guys, in which year did Doris Lessing get Nobel Prize? I will tell you, 2007. Okay, 2007. Doris Lessing's Golden Notebook is a very famous postmodern novel. Who is the protagonist? Anna Wolf. She is writing in 4 differently colored notebooks. What are they? Black, red, yellow, blue. Black, red, yellow, blue. Remember that? Very good. Who is the protagonist in Children of Violence series of Doris Lessing? It is Martha Quest. Martha Quest. Doris Lessing wrote Canopus in Argos. What kind of books are they? Canopus in Argos. It is outer space fiction. She wrote outer space fiction. Who wrote The French Lieutenant's Woman? It is John Fowles. French Lieutenant's Woman, 1969. It is a Victorian style romance, guys, by John Fowles. Sarah Woodruff is the protagonist. She is a very unconventional Victorian woman. Sarah Woodruff. Okay, that is good. Very, very good. Who wrote the novel Possession? It is A.S. Byatt. Do you know the magic realist author who wrote Bristol Trilogy? Magic realist author Angela Carter wrote Bristol Trilogy. Okay, I don't know if all these are very, very important, but who's the author of Amsterdam, Atonement, Saturday, Hagseed, based on Tempest? No, Hagseed is by Margaret Atwood. This is Ian McEwan. Ian McEwan wrote Nutshell based on Shakespeare. Nutshell. Okay, that could be important for you. That is great, guys. Now, a few more writers in British literature, and then we will quickly revise American literature. Oh my God, this is a 1-hour power session where I'm going like an express train. Tomorrow is the last day. Please join me every day. Okay, who is the author of Miguel Street, The Mystic Monsieur, A House for Mr. Biswas, obviously, V.S. Naipaul, Mimic Men, okay, V.S. Naipaul. He also wrote A Bend in the River. In case they ask, don't get it wrong, which is the first novel by Salman Rushdie. Grimace, it is a science fiction novel, which is the science fiction novel by Amitav Ghosh. A Calcutta Chromosome, okay, and in which year did Midnight Children get Booker Prize? In 1981. Who directed the movie Midnight Children? It is Deepa Mehta. Deepa Mehta, very good. Which novel by Salman Rushdie presents the history of rock music? History of rock music is there in The Ground Beneath Her Feet. The Ground Beneath Her Feet. Which novel by Salman Rushdie presents Emperor Akbar's court? Emperor Akbar's court is in The Enchantress of Florence. The Enchantress of Florence. Will you remember, guys? Remember, Salman Rushdie wrote Imaginary Homelands. He wrote 2 children's books, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, Luca and the Fire of Life. Luca and the Fire of Life. Which novel by Salman Rushdie is set in Bombay and Cochin? Bombay and Cochin. Cochin in Kerala. It is the novel The Moor's Last Sigh. The Moor's Last Sigh. Very good. We have done an amazing revision of British literature. Now we are going into an amazing, equally amazing revision of American literature. Are you ready, guys? I will ask you very easy questions. Don't worry. Who coined the term American Dream? American Dream is a term coined by Truslow Adams. Truslow Adams. Remember, guys, the 1850s in America is called American Renaissance. It is based on a book called American Renaissance, Art and Expression in the Age of Emerson and Whitman. Previous year question of Kerala set. Who is the author? American Renaissance, 1850s book. American Renaissance, Art and Expression in the Age of Emerson and Whitman. It is F.O. Mathiasson. F.O. Mathiasson. All right, that was a question in the previous year. In which year did American Civil War happen? 1861 to 65. 1861 to 65 on the issue of slavery. Very good. The attempt to remove slavery was called what movement? What movement went against slavery? It is abolitionism. Which place was Transcendentalists associated with? Concord. Transcendentalists were associated with Concord. Who wrote Brahma? Hamatreya. It is Emerson. Emerson. Who wrote Civil Disobedience and Walden? It is Henry David Thoreau. Who is associated with the term the transparent eyeball? Human beings should be like transparent eyeballs. It is Emerson. Okay. Who wrote the lecture? Who gave the lecture? The American Scholar. Again, Emerson. Where did he give this lecture? He gave the lecture, American Scholar, to Phi Beta Kappa Society. And Emerson wrote the essay, Self-Reliance, guys, Self-Reliance. Which famous book was published on, self-published, on 4th of July, 1855. 4th of July, Independence Day, 1855. Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Very good. When lilacs last in the dooryard bloomed is an elegy for whom? It is for Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln. That is also great. What are the famous poems of Walt Whitman? Song of Myself, Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking, Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, I Heard America Singing, Passage to India, Prayer of Columbus, The Song of the Open Road. Will you remember? There was a child went forth. Okay, guys, who wrote the short story, The Birthmark? Young Goodman Brown. The Birthmark, Young Goodman Brown, The Minister's Black Veil. It is Nathaniel Hawthorne. Talking about short story, there is a very good free resource that I'm giving you apart from YouTube videos. It is the podcast in Spotify. Please download Spotify. Go to Kalyani Valat's No Stress Study Capsules. Use it. Today, right now, I am running a short stories for fun listening podcast series. Please enjoy. Okay, guys. Now tell me, in which year was the Scarlet Letter published? It was published in the year 1850. What is the first section of Scarlet Letter called, where there is a frame narrative? It is called The Custom House. The Custom House. Very good. Which is the novel by Nathaniel Hawthorne based on a curse and witchcraft? It is The House of the Seven Gables. Who wrote the poems Al-Araf, A Palace, Ulalume, Israfel, To Heaven, To Helen? It is Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe also wrote The Raven. The Raven is based on Charles Dickens's Barnaby Rudge, where also there is a raven called Grip. Do you know that, guys? Edgar Allan Poe wrote Tales of the Grotesque and the Arabesque, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Oval Portrait, The Purloined Letter. Which famous theorist discussed the Purloined Letter? It is Jacques Lacan. There are also stories, The Black Cat, The Cask of Amontillado, etc. Edgar Allan Poe wrote the essay, The Philosophy of Composition. Will you remember that? Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe, they were anti-transcendentalists. To whom is Moby Dick dedicated? Moby Dick is dedicated to Nathaniel Hawthorne. Moby Dick is subtitled The Whale. The Whale. Very good. Who is called the Nun of Amherst? It is Emily Dickinson. She wrote a lot of poems before I could not stop for death. My life closed twice before its close. I heard a fly buzz when I died. A bird came down the walk. Hope is the thing with feathers. Will you remember all this? I heard a funeral in my brain. Okay, guys. H.W. Longfellow belongs to which group of poets? H.W. Longfellow is a fireside poet. Who wrote The Gilded Age? It is Mark Twain. Mark Twain. What is the real name of Mark Twain? Mark Twain is Samuel Langhorne Clemens. Okay, in which year did Mark Twain publish The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn? 1885, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It is called the Great American Novel. There is an Indian novel which is based on this, and it is set against Indian independence and emergency. It is the Great Indian Novel by Shashi Tharoor. Okay, who wrote the novels, The American, The Portrait of a Lady, The Ambassadors, Daisy Miller? It is Henry James. Henry James. Who wrote the short stories, The Gift of the Magi, The Last Leaf? It is O. Henry. O. Henry. Okay, guys. Do you know who wrote The Yellow Wallpaper? The Yellow Wallpaper is a feminist short story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Will you remember who wrote the novel The Awakening? Very famous. The Awakening is by Kate Chopin. Kate Chopin is very important. Okay. Tell me this, guys, who was the first American to get Nobel Prize in Literature? It is Sinclair Lewis, Nobel Prize in Literature. Okay, guys, Jack London, Theodore Dreiser, Stephen Crane. These are members of which movements? Jack London, the author of Call of the Wild. Stephen Crane, who wrote The Red Badge of Courage. They are naturalism writers, naturalists. Naturalism is a very important movement. Okay. Now, which movement is Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, Zora Neale Hurston associated with? Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Claude McKay associated with Harlem Renaissance. Which Black American writer coined the term double consciousness? It is W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois, very important. And who wrote Native Son? Famous novel, Native Son, The Outsider. These are by Richard Wright. Richard Wright. Remember, I already talked about Ezra Pound, Hilda Doolittle, Amy Lovell, etc. Tell me, guys, who wrote poems like anyone lived in a pretty how town? This is previous year question from Kerala set. Anyone lived in a pretty how town? Buffalo Bills. I sing of Olaf, glad and big. These are by E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings' famous poems, important. All right, guys. Who wrote The Red Wheelbarrow? It is William Carlos Williams. Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, John Dos Passos, they were called what? They are the lost generation. Lost generation. Many of them were literary ambulance drivers. Okay. The term lost generation was coined by Gertrude Stein. Gertrude Stein. The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms. Novels by Hemingway. Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls, is set against Spanish Civil War. The Old Man and the Sea, in which year was it published? Santiago's Story, 1952. 1952. Okay, The Great Gatsby came in 1925, the same year as Mrs. Dalloway. Who is it by? The Great Gatsby is by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Very important, all these are. Who introduced realism in American drama? It is Eugene O'Neill. Eugene O'Neill experimented with certain technique in Emperor Jones and Hairy Ape. What is that technique? It is expressionism. Expressionism. All right. Eugene O'Neill wrote a series of plays based on Orestia of Aeschylus. What is that? It is Morning Becomes Electra. Morning Becomes Electra. Tell me, in which year was Death of a Salesman published? It is 1949. 1949. Death of a Salesman. Protagonist is Willie Loman. Remember, guys? Then in 1947 came All My Sons. That is also important. Which play by Arthur Miller is set against Salem witch trials? It is The Crucible. The Crucible. Who wrote Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? It is Tennessee Williams. Tennessee Williams called his own technique poetic realism. They all wrote domestic realism. Okay, domestic realism. The Sound and the Fury is a 1929 modernist novel by William Faulkner. William Faulkner's first novel is Soldier's Pay. And William Faulkner created the fictional plays Yokna Patafa. Yokna Patafa. All right. See, William Faulkner also wrote Absalom, Absalom, As I Lay Dying, Light in August. These are some of the major novels. Hemingway, William Faulkner, etc. also wrote short stories. That is also important. Who wrote the expressionist play, The Adding Machine? The Adding Machine is by Elmer Rice. Elmer Rice. Who wrote the absurd play, Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Zoo Story? It is by Edward Albee. Edward Albee, very important. Who is the national poet of America from New England? He was the author of collections like A Boy's Will, North of Boston. It is our Robert Frost. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, Road Not Taken, Mending Wall, Birches After Apple Picking, so many. And now Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, they are part of which movement? It is Beat Generation. Beat Generation. Which writer of the Beat Generation wrote Naked Lunch? It is William S. Burroughs who wrote Naked Lunch. Robert Lovell began which movement? Robert Lovell began confessional poetry. And other members of confessional poetry movement are, tell me, it is Adrian Rich and Sexton Sylvia Plath. Okay, who wrote Humboldt's Gift, Herzog? These are books by the Jewish American writer Saul Bellow. Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, William Gibson. These are writers of which genre? It is horror and cyberpunk fiction, science fiction, cyberpunk fiction. William Gibson wrote Neuromancer. Isaac Asimov wrote Foundation Trilogy. Ray Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451. Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001, A Space Odyssey. Okay, which is the first novel by Toni Morrison. The first novel by Toni Morrison is The Bluest Eye. What is the name of the protagonist? It is Pecola Breedlove. Pecola Breedlove. Who is the narrator? Claudia McTeer is the narrator. They had asked about Toni Morrison, which is the novel by Toni Morrison about a woman, a girl growing up into a woman. She lives in Bottoms. She becomes a prostitute like woman. It is Sula. Sula is the second, the companion novel to Bluest Eye, which is the novel by Toni Morrison, which is gothic. And Sede is an escaped slave who is hallucinating in that novel. It is Beloved. Beloved is the very famous novel, gothic novel by Toni Morrison. It is set in 121 Blueston Road. A lot of questions in our Kerala set are based on the opening lines. Dear friends, opening lines are very, very important. Please look up the opening lines. Will you do that? That is great. And then, do you know who is the author of the play Dutchman? Dutchman is by Amiri Baraka. Amiri Baraka, who wrote In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, womanist prose. It is Alice Walker, which is a famous epistolary novel by Alice Walker, published in 1982. It is The Color Purple. We have revised a lot of works and everything, guys. I have exceeded time by a few minutes. Power session will be 1 hour. Please join me tomorrow. Also, we will do criticism and theory and other important areas. Thank you very much. See you. Bye-bye. If you liked the video, it will be a great help. Please share with your friends.